I remember back in my 20s, it felt like I had an addiction to fantasy football. I know that sounds funny, but seriously, it was just the right combination of sports, which I loved, and doing it with people I knew and wanted to be competitive. And there were points where literally I would dream about it at night. Like, even if I wasn't actively engaged with it with my mind, like I was constantly sidetracked by it. Like, I didn't want to do other things that I knew I should be doing because I might miss like the latest update and so forth. Eventually I was convicted like I needed to give this up. Like, I personally in that moment, I wasn't capable of playing that and also growing in my faith, even though others were plenty capable of that. Like, it was hard to give something up that I looked forward to as like a source of pride and joy. In our passage today, we're on the brink of a riot because of a group of people in Ephesus are besides themselves that Paul's come into town and telling them that by following Christ, it's gonna cost something. So let's turn there. Acts 19, verses 23 through 27. About this time, there arose a great disturbance about the way. A silversmith named Demetrius, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought in a lot of business for the craftsmen there. He called them together along with the workers in related trades and said, "You know, my friends, that we received a good income from this business, and you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and practically the whole province of Asia. He says that gods made by human hands are no gods at all. There is danger not only that our trade will lose its good name, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited, and the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty." So in this passage, Demetrius has made his living off of making these silver shrines of a goddess. So he tells his friends, like, "Hey, you know, we've received a good income from this business." So Demetrius' concern has nothing to do with the legitimacy of Paul's message or who Christ really is, but it has to do with what Jesus is costing him. Now, we don't know for sure, but it seems like he's not even interested in hearing the facts about Christ because of what it's going to cost him. Now, I am someone who, when I go shopping, I like to minimize cost. If I can lower my bills, I want to minimize cost. And I'm all for minimizing cost in many aspects of life. But if we seek to minimize the cost of what it's going to take to follow Christ, we will ultimately be miserable people. We will live in a perpetual state of grieving the Holy Spirit, knowing that we aren't living into the fullness of what God has for us. Now, when I stopped playing fantasy football, it was costly. Like, I loved it. But there was simultaneously a peace that came when I was finally willing to pay that cost. Now, sure, fantasy football for someone in their 20s sounds like a very easy and lighthearted. But I think it starts with being willing to pay the smaller cost. Like, if I don't make it a habit of being willing to count the cost on the small things, how will I ever do it on the big things? I think what we have to get past is this unfounded fear that if we give something up that is hindering our devotion to God, that we will be miserable and missing out. And yet nothing can be further from the truth. So I want to leave you with this question. What is a cost that God may be asking you to pay for the purpose of removing a barrier of intimacy with Him?